Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Jason Davis here with you. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, and Soccer Morning. You need to know. Well, soccermorning.com right now, because we are in the home stretch of our drive, our fundraising drive for 2014. We have reached the 85% mark. I did the math this morning because I didn't know off the top of my head what 85% of our goal was. So I put it into Google and it told me 85%, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for everybody who stepped up and helped Soccer Morning in 2014. It's going to carry us into the meat of the year as we get ready here to take on a World Cup campaign, to cover all of the things that you've come to know us for covering. That includes the Premier League, Serie A, La Liga, Bundesliga, Mexico, Liga MX. We definitely want to expand on our South American coverage. Maybe we can work Asia into the mix. I don't know how many people out there are J-League fans or K-League fans or A-League fans. What's up with all the letters in Asia? J, K, A? Okay. Is China the C-League? No, it's the Super League. Not sure many Super League fans out there. But there are stories coming out of every part of the globe, and that's our goal here at Soccer Morning, to cover as much of it as possible. Now, we obviously pick our spots. And clearly, as an American, I am, I lean MLS, I lean U.S. national team. That doesn't mean we're going to be always covering those things. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the only thing we cover. Clearly, you've been around long enough to know that we make it varied. We're eclectic, but we still pick our spots. We try to find the best guests we can possibly find on each of the topics that we decide to focus on a daily basis, and we roll this over. And it's a two-man operation. We're making it work. By the way, if you're listening to this live, I should mention this. If you're listening to this live and you're a Redditor, that's what they call those people, right? Redditors. I'm doing an AMA today at noon at the MLS subreddit. So be on the lookout for that. Follow me on Twitter, DavisJSN. Follow Soccer Morning on Twitter. Send tweets to Soccer Morning. Just send tweets. Just thoughts and concerns and questions and comments. Just always be sending tweets. And you can call us 347-756-6276 pretty much whenever. Whenever there's not a guest on the air, you can call us. All right. So that bit of business out of the way. Let's talk about today's show. Today's show is on a Wednesday. There's a game today, right? City and Blackburn today. Is that FA Cup? I think that's FA Cup. Is it? No. City and Blackburn today. That's what I know is happening in terms of actual soccer. If there's more actual soccer, I'll check up on that as well. But mainly here in January, in the middle of the week, what we have is a bunch of off-the-field stories. There's certainly plenty of American off-the-field stories to talk about today. We're going to get Charlie Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and SoccerWire to join us in a couple of minutes to talk DC United's turnover this offseason as they head into a campaign in which they're trying to reverse their fortunes. Dead last in MLS in 2013. It did not go well for Ben Olsen. He's working on it. The team is working on it. Dave Casper is working on it. They've made significant changes, and one of those changes happened yesterday. They obtained Jeff Park, center back from the Philadelphia Union, in exchange for a younger center back, Ethan White. I think I mentioned this because it broke during the show. And the top allocation spot. They swapped allocation spots. And the allocation order, if you're unaware, is what's used for teams to obtain returning MLS players. Bakary Soumare, Marco Papa, who's coming back soon, looks like. Or U.S. men's national team players, whether they're MLS players or not. In this case, Maurice Edu. He's the guy that Philadelphia wants. Now, the problem is, and this was reported by Jeff Carlisle on Twitter yesterday, Jeff Carlisle is a paragon of journalistic integrity. I have no reason to doubt that this is the case. He reported that Maurice Edu wants $1.2 million for his salary. It seemed to be indicated in the tweet that the Union are okay with that, but that MLS itself is balking at it. Now, clearly, we have to, every time these issues come up, we have to kind of reset and remember MLS controls pretty much everything. The MLS HQ, they own all the contracts. If they say, and Maurice Edu at $1.2 million would clearly be a DP. If they say no, because they are concerned about their salary structure, in most cases, I think a lot of people would understand that. Now, there is the free market people out there. If Philadelphia wants to pay it, what's the problem? Well, again, MLS is, and I'm not making a value judgment here. I'm not saying MLS is right or wrong at the moment. We're going to talk about it. We're going to work this out. I have an opinion, but we'll work this out. What we need to remember, though, is that MLS is built on the idea of cost control. That's the very foundation of the league, especially salaries, which is the major cost that they deal with. So if you give Maurice Edu, who hasn't played in a year and a half effectively, been riding the pine at Stoke. Now, he was on $1.6 million or something insane at Stoke to ride the pine, or not even make the bench, not even make the 18 at Stoke. If you give him $1.2 million, now, then what does that mean for the Will Johnsons and Kyle Beckermans and Dax McCartys of the world? Osvaldo Alonso just got a new deal. I guarantee you he didn't get $1.2 million. And I'm not saying that Osvaldo Alonso and Beckerman and McCarty, I'm not even saying that they're on the same level as Maurice Edu. Honestly, I don't know where Maurice Edu's level is right now. Now, I think they're very good players. I think it's going to be difficult for Maurice Edu to match those guys based on what I've seen the last couple of years. But to pay Maurice Edu $1.2 million throws that salary structure out of whack. Now, the issue again for MLS in this new era of let's spend some money, let's get Clint Dempsey in here, let's grab Michael Bradley and Jermaine Defoe. The issue is that you gave Michael Bradley $6.5 million or whatever it is a season. And that throws everything out of whack as well. If Michael Bradley is worth $6.5 million, what is Maurice Edu worth? Now, Maurice Edu is not a current U.S. international. He is not, well, he's not in the picture at the moment. He might be. If he plays well in MLS, he might be. But he's not a starter. He's not Michael Bradley penciled into the lineup every time out. There are a lot of differences between the two players, but we're talking about a significant difference in salary. Is that enough to cover the differences in marketability? Is Maurice Edu less marketable than Michael Bradley? Is that just because Michael Bradley is an automatic starter for the U.S. national team and that he last played for Roma? And what are those? And his name is Bradley? I mean, what's the issue here? So all these things that we're talking about, and clearly DC United, the trade itself, we're going to talk to Charlie Boehm in a second. The trade itself is interesting because it seems to indicate that DC got fleeced. They gave up a young, talented center back and their allocation spot for an aging center back. Jeff Park's very good, but an aging center back. But then again, Philadelphia is having to move up in the allocation in order to get a player who will most likely be on a DP contract when we have this precedent set now by Clint Dempsey and Michael Bradley that these players don't go through the allocation process, these U.S. internationals. Which is it? Why is Maurice Edu different? Because the league's not stepping up to pay part of his salary? Or because there's no... they're not going to step up to pay part of his transfer fee? I'm not sure what this is. Lots of questions surrounding MLS. And the interesting thing about it all is that the SuperDraft is tomorrow. And I know there are people out there talking about who's going number one, where's Patrick Mullins going to go, et cetera, et cetera. But all of this stuff is overshadowing the SuperDraft, and we still don't know. The TV deal may come out tomorrow. We've got that. There's not only Maurice Edu, but the Michael Bradley news is still fresh. There's so many things happening in MLS. They're going to overshadow that SuperDraft tomorrow, and yet the MLS world is going to gather there. It's going to be very interesting. All right, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. When we come back, Charlie Boehm will join us. We'll talk DC United, MLS. We'll talk SuperDraft. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Let's begin.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
All right, good pal, good buddy of the show, Charlie Boehm on the line with us via Skype. Always good to have Charlie's voice and Charlie's face on Soccer Morning. Hi, Charlie.
Skype.
Yes. Charlie writes for MLSsoccer.com and SoccerWire.com. So bookmark both of those places. Follow him on Twitter, CBOEHM. All right, Charlie. Let's talk
And we
DC.
can't forget, Jason, you and I are USSoccerPlayers.com colleagues.
That's
as well.
right. We do both write at USSoccerPlayers.com. I always forget. And Jay will probably be upset if he hears me say that.
Unacceptable.
No, I actually just filed with US Soccer Players last night. So, go to USSoccerPlayers.com as well. Charlie, let's talk DC United. Let's talk about this overhaul that they're going through in the off. It was necessary. Clearly, last year's team was a disaster. They had to make a lot of changes. They have done so in some interesting ways. The most recent change: Jeff Park in, Ethan White, and the top allocations order spot out. From your perspective, when you saw this trade, was your immediate response, "What is DC doing?" Because that was most people's.
Yeah, it was hard to avoid that response, to be sure. I think they've made a lot of savvy moves, and they have utilized a lot of structural options that were made available to them between coming last place in the league and winning the U.S. Open Cup. So they had allocation money to work with. They had some various tools, but this one was a little bit of a head scratcher. And coming up almost 4 years to the day after their trade, another trade with Philly that will kind of has gone down in infamy, a pre-draft trade that they made with the Union to bring Troy Perkins back after his return from Europe. Which ended up being a very, very one-sided trade, and so it's there's a little bit of irony in the fact that they've swung another deal that looks, at least on first glance, as though it was a win for the Union.
Now, and this is no slight to Jeff Park, who is a solid, above-average MLS center back. I would say he's 31 though, Charlie, and that's on the downside of things. Ethan White, I think, while still developing as a player, was someone DC United fans thought would be one for the future. Just from that perspective, even if you take out the allocation order spot, it's interesting. And does it say anything specific or further the narrative about what Ben Olsen wants his team to look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, in both the public statements and the private, that the club officials have made and private conversations I've had with people, there's been a strong emphasis among United folks towards getting more MLS experience, more experience overall, but specifically proven veterans within the league, which is understandable. And in this case, that's been the emphasis as well. Ethan White is a third-year pro, and Jeff Park has been around for a decade or so. So they've gotten older, which is good in a lot of ways, especially considering that they're going to be challenged with international play and what looks like a much more challenging Eastern Conference than in past years, the recent past. However, when you get older, you tend to get slower, right? Almost always. And so the biggest question now is that what we can expect at the moment to be the starting center back pairing for United, which would be Bobby Boswell and Jeff Park, have a lot of experience. I can run around
circles. I can run circles around those guys, I think.
Well, listen, it's let me put it this way. I think they're both good defenders, but it is up to them to prove that they are not going to be caught out and not going to be too statuesque. I mean, the United fans are already discussing the what they see as a tactical reality of this move, which is that they're going to have to play a deeper line. There's going to have to be a little bit of a different tactical outlook. These two guys are maybe we're not going to want to push them up to the halfway line and dare teams to play in behind them. There's even the worst MLS teams have pace along the front line. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be a real concern. Now, granted, they've brought in Sean Franklin, who's a really solid option on the right-hand side. And then as of now, I guess it looks like Chris Korb is going to be starting on the left, although there may be a little bit of a battle for that left back job.
Well, let's talk about the guys that'll be in front of Boswell and Park, presuming that there are the starting center back pairing. I mean, is Olsen going to play two holding midfielder? Is he going to play Kitchen alongside somebody else? Is that going to be? I mean, who does he have? I'm already losing track of who's in and who's out at DC. Who's the obvious choice to step in and help protect that back line?
Right. So to give you an idea of what the turnover has been, the official transactions up to this point, Marcelo Zaragoza is out. Dwayne De Rosario is out. John Thornton is out. Those are your central midfield options that have left United.
Right.
Coming in, you have Davy Arnaud, who may be a flank player. He can also play in the midfield. And then they got a couple of young guys. Jared Jeffrey was a player who got a lot of minutes alongside Kitchen. Yeah. And you could call that two box-to-box players, or you could call that a holding mid and a box-to-box mid. But in general, Ben Olsen has shown a preference tactically for a pretty straightforward 4-4-2 with two kind of roving terrier-type central midfielders and either a second striker dropping deep, or an out-and-out playmaker and more of a 4-5-1. So he likes defensive cover. So I have no reason to believe they won't try and protect this center back partnership. But the question is, what does that do to the numbers elsewhere? Right. One of the hot rumors this week is that one of their most creative midfielders, Luis Silva, is being shopped around and is on the trading block. I was actually told by a couple of folks that he might have been dealt as early as yesterday. Although Steve Goff of the Washington Post is reporting that is an incorrect report. Mm-hmm. But in my jury is out on that. We'll see what happens.
All right, Luis Silva, perhaps on the block, perhaps not on the block. Now, DC United also has the number 1 overall draft pick at the SuperDraft tomorrow in Philadelphia. This is one of those drafts, and this is pretty much the norm now, where there isn't a consensus number 1. It's not a matter of there is one player who is, he's not. There's no LeBron James. There's no. I can't think of the last clear number 1 NFL player, but it doesn't really work that way, and it hasn't for a while. Where will DC United go? And you and I just talked about this. Number 1s don't do well, particularly. Well, the jury is obviously out on Andrew Farrell. Andrew Wenger's having a tough time in Montreal. You go back a couple of years. Danny Mwanga, Steve Zakawani got hurt. That's not his fault. This is not a spot that you really want to be in if you're a college player, but who's the guy?
Right. Here's where we get into inside baseball, where it's not so much that I don't feel confident that United is simply going to pick their favorite player of the options. If I had to guess, I'd say their short list is probably Steve Birnbaum, Christian Dean, the two center backs from Cal, and Patrick Mullins is probably in their consideration as well. The problem is, though, because of Generation Adidas, which we'll skip the primer on that, but basically, that offers pretty priceless salary cap relief for teams who pick those players. Christian Dean of that group is the only Generation Adidas, whereas the other two guys are seniors who apparently have agreed what I believe are 6-figure contracts. So it's probably somewhere a little bit north of $100,000 a year. United has dumped a lot of salary cap space, but the problem is they've picked up a good chunk again now with this move for Jeff Park, who is a cap hit north of $200,000 a year. Ethan White was at a guaranteed compensation of $91,000 last year. Mm-hmm. So they have squeezed their own cap room, which not that long ago was pretty substantial. And Dave Casper, the GM, has gone on record this week as saying that they specifically traded away that top allocation spot because they didn't think they could afford. But and he meant in terms of salary cap. Others would say it probably meant in terms of the outright expenditures as well. But they didn't have the room to fit in a max player like Maurice Edu, which everybody seems pretty clear. It's Maurice Edu is the guy at the top of that list. So that means that I have a feeling, and others do as well, that Generation Adidas cap relief that Christian Dean offers is going to be too tempting for them to ignore. I'm not certain that's the best pick for them, and I'm not certain that he's ready to contribute right away. But these are financial realities of MLS and the GA system.
Obviously, the GA system incentivizes picking those guys. Now, the question, though, and sort of the other side of, well, the top guys don't usually do that well, and even down the draft, it's kind of hit or miss. I mean, we're not talking about a system that guarantees you a contributor in the first round. I mean, whereas that might be the case in almost every other sport. So for DC United, regardless if it's the quote unquote best pick, and college soccer better than I do, these kids better than I do, is there kind of a little bit of a plausible deniability? Well, he's the best kid in our particular situation, and this is a draft system that doesn't really generate star players anyway. What's the big deal?
Oh, it's sort of like picking your spouse. No matter what you pick, you're never going to look back, right? At least not in public. You're not going to acknowledge that you had second thoughts or that you might have made the wrong decision. Once you put your scarf on that guy on draft day, he's your guy. So for me, there's a little bit of an intangible here. Patrick Mullins has been a truly dominant college player for several years now, just up the road from RFK at University of Maryland. Certainly, the United staff should know him as well as anyone in MLS does. His draft stock is not that high, and I think there are some systemic reasons for that are not his fault. I think that the system in general, as it's grown up, is that at this time of year, draft prospects who are attacking players, who are goal scorers, who are college veterans, are just not trusted to the same extent that raw potential is. We fall in love with raw potential at this time of year. So, that being said, I if I'm United, I find it hard to ignore all those many qualities that Patrick Mullins brings to the table, and I think he brings something that's potentially more special than just a couple of very, very good center backs. But we'll see.
Well, I think you've obviously got a point there, and Mullins back-to-back Herman Award winner and scored a ton of goals for Maryland. I guess that maybe the thinking, and I'm just kind of working this out in my head as we go along. Now that MLS has committed to some sort of real reserve league by partnering with USL. Perhaps the idea is, and I'm not sure how old Patrick Mullins is. He's not young by soccer standards. The idea is to get kids with more potential, because you're going to end up sticking them in the reserve league anyway. Patrick Mullins isn't going to get a ton of minutes, even at DC United. Right,
and every coach I've ever talked to, at every level, but especially at the MLS level, will talk about our system. And we want it once we get them in our system, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you and I have had this conversation before, but. Yeah. Clubs are convinced that they are the best environment developmentally for a player that's on their radar. But in this case, I would say you have to give some credit to Sasha Swarovski and the pipeline of talent that's come out of Maryland. Maryland is not a typical college program in the sense that there's some hit or miss stuff. Obviously not every Terp has gone and become an MLS star, but there's a proven track record of players coming out of there, and if not being pro ready right off the bat, of certainly having all the tools, and he can point to Graham Zusi and any number of other current MLS stars.
Mo Edu coming back.
Yeah. So and some of the same questions were asked about Zusi, quite frankly. Is it now 5 years ago? Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gonzalez, De La Garza. There's obviously a track record, and when you grab a guy from Maryland, you might expect him to be able to step right in. Again, the mentality of the draft is sort of a function of some of the other things that are happening, and whether or not the draft is producing the same level of player, the very core approach has changed for a lot of clubs. I'm not sure that's true for DC United, but we'll see. So DC United at this point, with this roster overhaul, bringing in Boswell and Park in the center, Sean Franklin, as you mentioned, D-Rose out. You've got some young attacking talent. It's funny because right now it looks like DC very old at the back. Not very old. Sorry, Bobby. Sorry, Jeff. Older. They're younger than I am, by the way. Older at the back, and pretty young. Obviously EJ's in, but pretty young at the front, at least in terms of some of the strikers that they've got. And obviously Ben went young at the end of the year last year. Is that going to stick around, or is he going to shift to a more veteran approach up front as well?
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned, they have made another homegrown signing. They have had a steady stream of academy players moving on to the first team. Jalen Robinson is a very talented defender from Wake Forest, is coming out early to become United's latest homegrown. And there's the thought that the moving White suggests they have more confidence in Robinson than we think, and that he may be more ready to contribute. He's an AJ De La Garza type player doesn't have that hulking size that you associate with a prototypical center back, but he may have the ball playing ability and the smarts to do the job. But the sense is that he's going to understudy under Sean Franklin and eventually become a right back. So, this is where soccer is so different from other sports when it comes to drafts, because it's more subjective than any other sport. And there's just personal preference here. I mean, a lot of United fans were really high on Ethan White and really thought there was he showed real flashes of being an excellent player, especially under duress over the last couple of years, being challenged regularly. But if the statements coming out of the United camp suggested they just didn't really rate him that much. Yeah. They didn't think he was going to be able to break his way into the lineup. My question is, though, if you can find a center back like that in your backyard in your own system,
right.
Why invest in a big time, highly sought after center back in the college route? Maybe there are certain skills that need to be that are rarer that need to be prioritized.
It's interesting. I mean, I always hate to see a local guy have to leave his local team. Ethan White's a local guy from Kensington, and you wonder. And I got to get going here, Charlie. But you wonder if DC couldn't get out of Ethan White what his potential seemed to be. Isn't that an indictment of DC United and what they did with him?
Yeah, I mean, I simply don't see. I don't understand the wisdom. If it turns out that they're going to swap Ethan White for Christian Dean, in a sense, I don't see that. Mm-hmm. We always talk about upside, but if you're, so I can't relate to that particular perspective on it. But
as you said, cost. It's partly about cost. $91,000 a year salary versus the GA contract that doesn't hit your budget. So,
but here's the thing: the other issue with the GA program is that if Christian Dean is a success, he's going to be transitioned out of that GA program rather quickly, and you're going to have to pick up a bigger price tag than White's.
Exactly. You're buying yourself a little bit of time, saving money for a short period of time, and perhaps making a trading talent that doesn't make it worth it. That's Charles Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and SoccerWire.com and USSoccerPlayers.com. Go check out everything he's got going on. Thanks for your time, Charlie. I appreciate it, man.
Likewise, Jason. See you in Philly.
Take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to 2002 number 1 draft pick Chris Bondi. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, happy to be joined on the telephone now by Chris Bondi. He's currently the assistant soccer coach at Holy Cross up in Massachusetts. He was also the 2002 number one overall SuperDraft pick of the then Dallas Burn. They were still the Burn back then, right, Chris?
Yep, they were Dallas Burn.
So, and Chris, again, 2002 SuperDraft, and we've got the SuperDraft coming up tomorrow. Lots of kids hoping to get picked to, find out what MLS team they're going to play for. You had come out of Connecticut. You had won the Herman Award. You're obviously a highly touted player back in 2002. What was the experience like ahead of the draft? And when did you know you were going to go number one?
I had an idea from talking to Mike Jeffries at the time, was the head coach. And I had an idea. I spoke to him the night before, and he said, yeah, we're going to take you number one, even though you have an injury with the knee and all that. So I had a pretty good idea because they also invited my folks to come up, because at that time it used to be at the Walt Disney World, complex. So they invited my folks to come up, and then, so I had a pretty idea that I was going to go number one overall.
And that actual moment, were you prepared for it? I mean, what's it like to be, we talk about how the MLS draft isn't the NFL draft or the NBA draft,
right.
But as a soccer player, as a guy who's coming out of college and you're dipping your toes into professional waters and you're getting ready to make your name as a pro, what's it like to actually hear your name, the first guy picked, and walk up on stage and go through that process?
Yeah, it was a bit surreal, to be honest with you, because it's something, as a player, you've always wanted to be a professional player. And then now to get an opportunity, you went to a great university at the University of Connecticut, and then now just to have the opportunity to get your name called and you're going to fulfill your dream is a bit surreal, to be honest with you. And then when they're about to call your name, to be honest, you just sit there and you don't, it's like, are they really going to call my name? Are they going to call my name? So there's a part of you like, well, maybe they might kind of change things up and call somebody else's name, but when they do call your name and you walk up there, kind of, you've accomplished one of your goals at least, to get started on your pro career. So that was kind of unbelievable. My family was there, so it was real special.
So even though you had been even though you had a reason to believe you're going number one, you had that moment of doubt right before they announced it?
Yeah, no, you still have that moment of doubt, because what if something happened that, some big time guy came up and from Europe and they don't know about. So, you never really know. And then when they do call your name, though, then you're like, okay, it's official. And you start to walk up there, and then you kind of see the people, I saw the FC Dallas, at the time, Dallas Burn, and coaching staff and things like that, kind of standing up and give me a hand. So then, this is really happening, and I have to be prepared to go up here and kind of say something that's worthwhile. So then that was a cool experience. So I still to this day remember that. Getting your name called.
You remember what you said?
To be honest with you, it was kind of funny because when I went up there, I've seen Mike Jeffries for 3 or 4 times, and I actually went and pointed at the Columbus Crew. I think it was Ziggy at the time that I pointed at, and I was like, "Thank you for drafting me." So hopefully nobody remember that, but I remember pointing at Ziggy because I was so nervous walking up and saying, "Thank you for drafting me." And then the Dallas was actually like a table 2 over to the side. So when I got drafted, it was kind of strange because I still get made fun of by Mike Jeffries for pointing at the wrong coach that drafted me. So that was kind of crazy.
To speak to that, I imagine in that moment you're a kid, you're sort of overwhelmed by everything. A couple of years ago, I was at a draft and I can't remember his name, and I apologize. Somebody thought they were drafted by New England, and it was actually the Crew or something like that, and got the team wrong up there. I imagine that's probably pretty easy, especially when you're not given. You being number one and talking to Mike Jeffries, you knew what was coming. But for most of those guys after you, they have no idea who's going to pick them. Now, you mentioned your injury. You were recovering from injury at the time. And I wonder if that changed the amount of pressure that you felt or how much pressure you felt as the number one pick. You head to Dallas. They obviously put a lot of faith in you, picking you despite the injury. What was that like?
Well, I think it added a little more, to be honest with you, because I've always played, when I was at UConn, you just kind of play because you're healthy, you go out there, you're fit, you're ready to go, and you're prepared. And then now you're drafted number one overall, quote unquote, you're supposed to be one of the savior, even though Dallas was a pretty good team at the time. We had Jason Christ, we even had Eddie Johnson, we have Broom, we have Pereira, Oscar Pereira at the time. So there's a pretty good team. So I don't even know why they got the number one pick, to be honest with you. But, coming in just with the whole number one thing, everybody's expecting him to be, Diego Maradona or Ashley Cole or Roberto Carlos right off the bat. And at that time, I'm still dealing with my injuries, So I'm trying to rush back. And when I came back, I don't think I was fully prepared just for the, the grind of the MLS season, the preseason. So I think it took me a while, to be honest with you, even my second year, and just trying to come back and really show people, okay, yeah, I am the right guy that they picked. So yeah, in the beginning, it took me some time, and I probably shouldn't have rushed back.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people talk a lot about, and now that we've got MLS popping up with these academies and getting these homegrown signings and everything else, one of the things people talk about the college game doesn't prepare guys for is what you mentioned, the grind, the difference between the time commitment and how much you're training and playing as a college player versus MLS. How drastic is that shift?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, now may not be too crazy, to be honest. But when I was coming out, it was pretty drastic, because you think about it, you go for 4 months where you're, especially being a UConn, you're in a professional atmosphere because you're traveling, top of the line, you're playing and practicing against some of the top players in the country. But that's for a 4-month period, and then all of a sudden now, boom, the season's over in December, and I'm sitting there from April to whenever until the spring, until I'm sitting there from January to March or April until the spring season starts again. So from that time, you're not really doing too much with the ball. So I think now with the academy system, even a lot of these kids with the homegrown, they understand what the club's about. When they do get drafted or get signed with that club, they know what the system's like. They know how the training method is. And most of the time, a lot of those kids have already trained with the first team or at least with the reserve. So they have an idea and understanding that what the program is about. And I really didn't have any idea at all. I was just getting kind of go in there and then boom, you got to showcase yourself. You've been drafted number one, you've been drafted wherever some of the other players were in my draft. And now you got to just go out there and showcase yourself. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I wonder, you obviously were drafted before the designated player era, before this rash of expansion we've had in MLS, and the league has changed significantly since you entered it. And whether or not we talk about the importance of the draft all the time, partly because of those academies, but you imagine that the draft of 2002 may have had a different level of importance on it than the draft of 2014.
Yeah, I think when people look at the draft, I think there's this negative connotation towards it, to be honest with you. And I don't know where that comes from. I think a lot of it is because of the, some of the negative outlook with the college game. Well, they're developing players, they're doing that. I think people forget that, Goodson and Mo and Bocanegra and Danny Caleb, Tallman, all these guys went to college, and these guys, Dempsey, these guys all went to college and all got drafted and then went to Europe and did pretty well. So I think the MLS and the draft, there's always a place for it, to be honest with you. But then I do understand that, there's a lot of kids that probably don't want to go to college now, just want to go straight ahead and go into the pro game. So I think that's another dimension that, as the league grows, we're going to kind of have an understanding of how that's going to kind of work. But right now, I do think there's a place for the draft. There's always going to be a place for the draft.
Well, I mean, is there a difference between saying there's a place for the draft and there's a place for college soccer? Because, I can imagine a future where MLS says, what, the draft isn't necessary anymore. If a kid wants to come out of college and turn pro, then let teams come to him with offers, and he can pick where he wants to play. If you had the opportunity to choose where you wanted to play, did that ever cross your mind? And back in 2002, like, oh, I wish I could choose where I wanted to play rather than just getting picked by whoever's number one?
To be honest with you, a kid growing up in Texas, I think the best place for me was really Dallas, because 4 hours away from my family and different things like that. But I think there's always that mindset. You do want to be kind of have your own little place in the game and say, okay, I want to go this way, or I want to go with that team. A lot of kids when they look at the Galaxy or some of the bigger teams, like with New York, and obviously now with the new team that's going to be in New York. What is it? I'm drawing blank here. The Jason Christ team. Anyway,
NYCFC.
Yeah, NYCFC. A lot of these kids want to probably go with that bigger club and things like that. But I really do think there's always going to be a place for the draft, though, to be honest, because there's just so many kids are developing later not many people, I didn't have the ability of Donovan or Beasley when I was their age, so I had to go to college and develop my game and find myself. And Dempsey, when Dempsey was coming out, if Dempsey was so great, he wouldn't have gone to Furman, no offense to Furman, but you would think he would have gone to Maryland or the UCLA, the bigger schools, or even in Connecticut back in the day. But Dempsey went to college, developed his game, and now he's probably one of the top players in the country, So, and I just think for as far as what the college game could present, it's different for everybody. There's going to be kids that are right out of high school can know, okay, I could go and play in the MLS and there'd be no problem. But there's be some other kids that need 3 or 4 years to develop their game. So I think there's always going to be a place for at least MLS in the draft.
Chris, you played over 100 times for Dallas Burn FC Dallas. You moved on, played overseas a little while, came back. I know you played for Miami FC. Since you retired, since your playing career ended, and the way that MLS has developed since you last played in it, what's the most striking thing? What's the biggest difference you see when you turn on your television, or if you head out to Gillette Stadium or head down to Jersey or wherever you might go and see a game? What's the biggest difference that stands out to you between your MLS and the MLS of today?
Yeah, I think MLS of today is cool. I know that kind of simplifying the answer, but it just seems to be real cool now. I think nowadays you have all these guys, when they walk around, people know who they are. And I always thought that was important because I think the sport at the time when I played, it's just soccer, it's just soccer. But now, these guys are all cool. People are even talking about how the coaches are dressed on the sideline. I think there's something, there's a coolness about it. And I think once you get to that point where it's not, it's just, these guys just out there kicking the ball and running around. It's important now that when these kids are getting drafted, that people are going to be watching them. And I think that's why the draft is so important, because now all these fans are going to see these kids and then being able to follow them. And when their team does draft them, okay, I knew he played at this school, I knew he played at this school. But yeah, the league in itself is just cool and is, is a happening place, to be. And when the games are going on and you see Seattle and Portland, we didn't really have that kind of fan base when I played, and that's something I really kind of miss about it.
So that's the one thing that you would identify as, if I could experience anything from MLS today, it'd be that, that environment, what happens in Portland, what happens in Seattle.
Yeah, I think the environment itself, because the environment breeds, competitiveness. The environment breeds players want to come over here and play, because I think once you get that environment, then all these guys from Europe and, Brazil and Argentina, they all want to come over here and play now, because if you experience that, in the U.S. where you're making the same amount of money to live in, you're going to get the best kind of living, and you're not going to be hounded, getting chased all the time like in some other countries, So now you have that aspect of it, and it just, the league itself and the competitiveness of it and the players that are in it. Obviously, now the product is that much better because players are, seem bigger, faster, smarter, and they're taking the game a little bit. And yeah, but for the most part, I think when I watch the game, I miss is just the atmosphere around the games, walking out to the red carpet in Seattle. And I just can't even imagine. Sometimes it makes me want to hurry up and fix my knee or get a little bit younger and go play. But yeah, no, those days are long gone,
Yeah. The one of the things that I think a lot of people kind of gloss over when we talk about the development of MLS is just those little professional things that have changed, the training facilities that the guys are going to day to day, weight rooms, nutrition, being able to look after themselves in the off season. Whereas, and it's not completely there yet. And when you have guys on $35,000 a year, it's going to be still a question, Chris. But from your experience in MLS of the early 2000s, and what's happening now with some of the state of the art training regimens that these teams have, how important is that for a professional player just to be at the peak of his game day to day?
Well, I think it's very important, to be honest with you. If I knew all that stuff about the nutritional part of the game and just, obviously now guys doing yoga, Pilates and all that, not to say we didn't have it back then. I think we did, but it wasn't something in the forefront, to be honest with you, like it is now. And, I probably would still be playing because you have some guys that are really taking care of themselves and really kind of utilize those avenues. And I know different clubs had that, to be honest. I feel like Galaxy, for some reason, always kind of been at that, always try to strive for that, and different clubs didn't at the time. But, yeah, I think it's so important, and I think it just shows, the commitment of the leagues when you do have that. You're putting that out there, and you show that you do care about the players, and you can tell with the quality of play on the field now. Not to say back then, obviously we had some special players in the league, with the older guys, but the league just seems so much, just quicker, it's faster, it's more intense, and there's a competitive edge to it. And I think that's why you get so many people intrigued by the league, and I think we forget too that the league's what 14, 15, maybe even 17 years old, so it's still, still so young, and it's going to keep developing and keep getting better. So, and I think that's the most important thing. People are actually taking note of it, and the club itself are really spending the money in the right areas. Like you said, with the facilities and the nutritional part of it too. So it's going to only be beneficial for the league as we move forward.
Yeah, the last thing I'll talk about with you here, and this is the reason that you and I connected on Twitter, and we brought you on the show today. Maurice Edu reportedly asking for $1.2 million salary to come back to MLS. Some discussion over whether or not that changes the salary structure of the league or changes the market for players like him. We know Michael Bradley's getting a lot of money to play in Toronto. From your perspective, I mean, MLS has long been slow growth, conservative. Let's keep salaries down. And I'm sure you experienced some of that while you played. When you see a guy like Maurice Edu ask for that much money, is your first instinct, well, he needs to, he should be getting it if they're going to pay Michael Bradley that much? Or, how do we tie this all into making sure MLS is operational? I mean, we want MLS to stick around, Chris.
Yeah, I think we want MLS to stick around, but the MLS just has to be honest with itself and honest with us. How do you give Dempsey that kind of money and Bradley that kind of money, and then a club is saying, we want this guy, we value this guy, and we're willing to pay him what he's asking for, and you're saying, well, no, we don't think he's worth that because marketing-wise, I don't know if we could get that much. So is MLS marketing certain players, or are they marketing the team? Mm-hmm. I just right now, there's not really a blueprint to say how they're doing business, and I think that's what I get a little bit confused about. And I love the league, and I think obviously the longevity of the league is important. But if I'm a fan of the union, and I'm saying, okay, the club is saying this guy is valued and we want him, I don't care how much they're paying him. They could pay him $2 million, $3 million, as long as he come up and help our team. Because MLS has shown that with certain players, money doesn't really matter though. So are they worried that Mo Edu's not worth that? What if the union say he is worth that? So I think MLS is going to get to a point where, as a fan, I don't care if Bradley and Dempsey comes back to the U.S. if he's not on my team. To be honest with you, I think right now we're still, we want Josie to come back and it's going to be good for the league, or it's going to be great for the league. No, I want Josie to come back and hopefully he's going to be in my team. And I think once we get to that stage where players are coming back and they're on your team and they're playing and they're helping your team win, and I think that's when the league's at a point now where it's going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing. So yeah, I think it's a touchy subject because I don't understand how you pay certain guys a certain amount of money, but then you can tell a club, no, you can't pay this guy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's ever going to get to a point where I'm to be honest with you, I can sit here and argue about it, but I don't know how MLS does business. That's where I get confused about, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, obviously MLS is a unique entity, and before you came into the league, they went through the whole lawsuit with the single entity, and they were allowed to continue operating the way they do, and now it's causing some problems. If they want to grow, they may be outgrowing the way that they used to do business. So lots of questions.
Is this still single entity? Because I'm confused though. If it is, then how is Dempsey and Bradley getting signed? That's kind of how I'm a little confused how it is though.
It's still single entity, and in both of those cases, the word is that transfer fees were paid by the league itself rather than the clubs themselves. The clubs pay the contract. It's complicated, Chris, and I don't blame you for being confused. Lots of people are, and I spend, this show isn't just about MLS, but when I do talk MLS, I spend a lot of time, too much time, trying to explain the rules as I understand them, and I'm not an expert. So it's, there's only so much you can keep up with. Well, it'll be fascinating to watch. I definitely want to get you back in the future as all of this stuff develops. We'll definitely get Chris Bondi back on the show in the near future. Thank you very much. Go follow Chris on Twitter, by the way. Chris Bondi, Gbandi. Thank you very much for your time, Chris. I appreciate it.
All right, it's been fun, Jason. All right, let's do it again.
All right, let's take a break. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. When we come back, let's delve a little bit more into the Mo Edu news. What exactly is happening and what kind of problems this is going to cause for Major League Soccer if they decide to shoot the union down. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning. Thanks again to Chris Bondi for joining us. If you've been around MLS, if you've been paying attention to MLS for some time, you know Chris Bondi. You know his story. Maybe you didn't know he was the number 1 overall draft pick in 2002, but you certainly remember his name playing for the Dallas Burn FC Dallas teams of the early 2000s, now coaching at Holy Cross. The coaching their soccer program up there. Fascinating stuff. And good I enjoy the memories of the draft. It's changed significantly since 2002. It honestly has. I mean, it's 12 years. How could it not? But as Chris mentioned, the venue has changed. Sort of the feeling around the draft has changed. And one thing, I led off with this morning. The thing I'm feeling, and we'll see what happens when I get to Philadelphia tomorrow. And by the way, I have to mention what's happening tomorrow. The feeling I'm getting is that while there is a draft happening and there are players to be picked and some of them may end up being good MLS players in the long run, the talking points around the league have nothing to do with that right now. That is a very small part of what's happening in the general discussion about MLS. The general discussion about MLS is Michael Bradley, it's Jermaine Defoe, it's Maurice Edu, it's Camilo. Not really. He's kind of dropped off of our radar, but he's still out there. He's still hanging out in Mexico doing his thing. That still remains unresolved. Now, I've seen some news reports or some Twitter mentions that he possibly could be sold for a 7-figure number. If that's the case, then that's a win for the Vancouver Whitecaps because they save face on the whole thing. But if Camilo's situation continues to drag on, there should be some questions tomorrow in Philadelphia of MLS brass, Don Garber especially, about the Camilo situation. There should be questions about why Toronto FC and the league are going to step up and pay Michael Bradley what they're going to give him. And the commitment is, Ron Waxman on Twitter, the commitment between the two players is $100 million from TFC. Why they're going to pay Michael Bradley that and then deny the Philadelphia Union the opportunity to sign Maurice Edu at $1.2 million. Now, there are so many questions surrounding Maurice Edu and this situation. It gets brand new. Processing it yesterday based on Jeff Carlisle's tweet. But there are so many questions around here with this that it's even hard to sort of frame the discussion. MLS has made its bed on this deal. They decided to open up the coffers for Clint Dempsey. They decided to open up the coffers for Michael Bradley. They decided to make these moves public, do them very big, show that they are advancing as a league. Now, this is, again, Chris Bondi had a good point. he wants to see when fans are excited to see a player come back and play for their team and not care that Clint Dempsey is with Seattle. But we're still in this kumbaya mode. Eventually, that's going to fade away, and MLS is going to have some serious problems. 314, you're on the line. You're on the air.
Hey, Jason, have you ever heard of a book called Animal Farm?
I have heard of Animal Farm. I'll admit that I have not read Animal Farm, and that is probably a bad commentary. I mean, I love 1984, but I haven't read Animal Farm.
Well, there's a part in Animal Farm where it says, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equaler.
Right, which is you'll hear that sometimes. I want equality for everyone, but I want more for me. I mean, that kind of stuff is out there. What's your point with this quote from Animal Farm?
Well, it seems like MLS is running like Animal Farm.
Okay, fair enough. And what
either certain players? Oh, go ahead.
No. If you've got if you've got the factors involved, absolutely, they lay them out.
Well, first of all, you got certain players that are more equal than other players, and then you got certain teams that are more equal than other teams.
Okay, fair enough. Long has MLS dealt with the notion that there is a bias towards the big market teams. Now, you could argue that considering the New York Red Bulls have exactly one trophy in their history, that seems kind of odd if that's the case. And yes, the Galaxy have a lot of things, quote unquote, given to them, but they also spend more money than anybody else. It's kind of interesting because I understand why people are frustrated with MLS rules. And I also understand why MLS wants to keep the rules as malleable as possible as they develop. But when you end up in this catch-22 situation, when you paint yourself into I'm sorry for all of these cliches, but when you end up painting yourself into a corner where you've got Michael Bradley making a ton of money. Now, again, his resume is significantly different than Maurice Edu, but Maurice Edu's not asking for $6 million. He's asking for $1.2 million, which is a pay cut for him. MLS has some questions to answer because I think I didn't get your name, but what I think the key thing here that everybody's focusing on is that the union reportedly want to pay it.
Oh, my name's Daniel. I think if the team wants to pay the DP contract, they should be allowed.
Okay. Again, and MLS, they're having this very visceral reaction. Wait a second. If we give Maurice Edu $1.2 million, then what does that mean for the rest of our salary market? That's Dax McCarty. That's Kyle Beckerman. That's sorry, I'm blanking. Will Johnson out in Portland. That's Osvaldo Alonso. There are a lot of guys. There's probably 2 or 3 more I'm missing that are in that discussion. If Maurice Edu's getting $1.2 million, doesn't that immediately make all of those other guys underpaid? Doesn't that immediately say that all of those other guys are significantly underpaid? Because if I'm not mistaken, none of those guys are even close to DP contracts.
Well, I agree with you on that, but at the same time, MLS has already opened that
Pandora's box. Pandora's box? You want to go with that one?
Yeah, with Michael Bradley, Clint Dempsey signings that, they're going to have a lot of answers for when the CBA comes up. And I got a bad feeling it's going to be a complete mess.
I think a lot of people are leaning that direction. I'm hopeful, but I'm only hopeful because I think MLS is damaging their own leverage. And I'm hoping that MLS decides, okay, look, in the best interest of the sport and this league, we're going to have to give significantly because we've already made a mess of this. Now, for good reason. I mean, you could argue that Dempsey and Bradley and even Defoe and some of this big spending, all this stuff benefits the league in the long run. It indicates a league that's pushing forward. And we have to wait and see what the TV contract is. And by the way, I've been told not going to be announced tomorrow in Philadelphia, more than likely. Jonathan Tannenwald reporting that. So we won't know tomorrow, but we will know in the near future what MLS is getting from their TV contract. And that may be even more than what they're paying to Bradley is going to move the needle on salaries. Right?
Right. But at the same time, you got all these other players, who are working their butts off in MLS who see this. I mean, look at Eddie Johnson. He's probably throwing well, he got a clean word to say it.
He got look. He's getting a significant raise to go to DC. Whether or not it's going to satisfy him, I don't know. Time will tell. Thanks for the call, Daniel. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for taking me.
Right. Area code 415. You're on the air. Who's this?
Yeah, this is Eric out in the Bay Area. I wanted to comment on Bradley. As far as I know, there's 3 U.S. players in the league right now that's getting the big dollar contract. That's Donovan, Dempsey, and Bradley. And I was thinking about what these guys have in common that maybe Maurice Edu or Eddie Johnson don't have. And it's a few things, but 2 things primarily. These 3 guys all have the regulars on the national team, and they've all scored in a World Cup.
Huh.
And so there's sort of like an American hero status that you get, I think, when you've scored in the World Cup.
Okay.
And so I'm just trying to think of what separates these guys from others and where we're drawing that line.
Well, I think it's very subjective. It's a very nebulous kind of. I agree with you that there's a significant difference between those 2 guys. I mean, those 3 guys and guys like Edu and Eddie Johnson. But again, it's a nebulous thing, and the problem isn't that there's a line that we can sort of imagine. It's the problem is that MLS has yet to draw it for everybody to understand.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah, thanks for the call, and love the show.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. If you do want to get in, phone lines are open. Bring them. 347-756-6276 is the phone number. Happy to talk certainly about this Maurice Edu thing, what MLS is dealing with here. Because, again, MLS saying we're going to dump money in Clint Dempsey's lap to bring him back before anybody expected him to be here, and we're going to dump money in Michael Bradley's lap to bring him back well before anybody expected him to be here, is, I think, in the long run, it's good business. I mean, you could argue about overpaying Michael Bradley. That's true. They're doing that. That's what it took to get him back. Maurice Edu is more of a creature of the general market. Now, is he worth $1.2 million if he goes to Turkey or back to Scotland or anywhere else? Maybe he is. Maybe he is. And he doesn't have to take the MLS deal. Now, the issue, again, is that Philadelphia seems willing to pay it. If Philadelphia is willing to pay it, most people are going to say, let them do so. And then they're the dominoes. Boom, 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 down the line. What MLS has done here, throwing off the wage scale, and not just for defensive midfielders, which is what Maurice Edu is, and the names I mentioned, Will Johnson, Dax McCarty, Kyle Beckerman, Osvaldo Alonso, but for everybody. Michael Parkhurst is coming back. I wonder what Michael Parkhurst is getting. Now, was he ever on the level of Maurice Edu? No. I mean, played in Denmark, had a couple of very good years, ends up in Germany, never gets any playing time. Mo, at least, made a name with himself at a big club. Argue about the quality. What is Michael Parkhurst getting? Area code 202, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Rick. I hate to call twice in 1 week, but I couldn't resist with the discussion you're having.
You need to call every day and get on the Vince program, man. What's up?
Well, first off, I'm looking forward. Hopefully, we'll get to meet face-to-face in Philly tomorrow. But when you talk about the idea of is Kyle Beckerman underpaid if Maurice Edu is making 1.2, is Will Johnson, I think the argument is after Michael Bradley's making $6 million a year, is Kyle Beckerman underpaid? Is Will Johnson underpaid?
Sure.
Is the drop-off between Michael Bradley and Kyle Beckerman? I think that's a good comparison because they play roughly the same position for the national team on different levels.
Well, Rick, I mean, I see your point, and if we were talking about their abilities solely as soccer players, then yeah, I'd be right there with you. There's no justification for Michael Bradley to be a $6.5 million salary and Kyle Beckerman, whatever he is, which I'm guessing is close to $300,000 or something. But that's not the only factors involved here. I mean, clearly the fact that Michael Bradley has a marquee name, and we can debate why he does and why Beckerman doesn't, but Michael Bradley's a marquee name. That's what's driving his salary more than his ability on the field, and he's a better player than Kyle Beckerman.
No, I absolutely agree with that. But here's the key point. MLS kicked in to bring in Michael Bradley. They kicked in to bring in Clint Dempsey because those names are going to benefit the league as a whole because they're marquee names. MLS isn't kicking in to bring over a Kyle Beckerman. It isn't kicking in, reportedly, to bring in Maurice Edu. The Union is doing that. Real Salt Lake is doing that.
Sure.
So if these guys are only going to help market or only help benefit the team on a local level, and you're not asking the league to kick in that much money, it seems fundamentally unfair.
I don't really have a counter argument to that other than to say, again, we have to remember, and everybody knows this, it's just a matter of whether you believe it's right or not. We have to remember what the league is trying to do when they balk at a $1.2 million salary from Maurice Edu. It's not that they think he doesn't deserve it on some level. It's that they don't want him fundamentally changing their salary market internally. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's about internal salary. Now, and I know you know that, but again, if you allow the union, I'm just talking about the potential ramifications. I'm not making a judgment here. Yeah. If you allow the union to pay Maurice Edu $1.2 million, they'll bring him in as a DP, pay $1.2 million to him salary-wise. When all of those contracts come up, there's going to be significant demands. Now, I said this yesterday on Twitter, and I think this is a thing a lot of people miss. If you took the salary controls out of MLS, if you just remove them all and said, okay, let the market dictate itself, let teams bid against each other, because that's essentially what the league prevents is teams bidding against each other for players. If you took those controls out, then there's the salaries for all of the best players go up, and the league gets incredibly more expensive without necessarily getting better. So we're talking about a workers' rights issue, not a league quality issue. I just want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right to that point. I just think the Rubicon's already been crossed with Bradley contract, because you have to look at that, and even allowing for the marketability, and even allowing for the fact that he might be the best U.S. player at this moment, that has already fundamentally redefined the salary structure. And this is the rest of the salary structure sort of slotting into place underneath it. Yeah,
you know what? I can make an argument that the Michael Bradley situation is exceptional for a number of reasons. Whether they add up to justification of denying Maurice Edu $1.2 million, that's in the eye of the beholder. MLS's problem isn't whether they can justify saying no. MLS's problem is whether they can justify saying no and deal with the PR hit that they're going to suffer because of it. That's the issue for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to add to the guy who was on right before me, Maurice Edu did score in a World Cup. It just didn't count.
Oh, that's true. that's true. And thanks for the call, Rick. You mentioned that, and somebody brought up Komen Koulibaly's name on Twitter this morning because the World Cup referees for 2014 are out. And so he said, "Oh, they've all got to be better than that Koulibaly guy." Komen Koulibaly. I don't know who's on the line with me. Who's this? You're on the air. Who's this?
Hey, this is Raph. How you doing, man?
Hey, Raph. You tried with your
Raph. Can you hear me?
Yes, you tried with your Skype, and I missed you. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it happens. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to meet tomorrow at the draft.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and here's the question that comes to mind with this whole Michael Bradley and Maurice Edu thing. I want to know who's blocking it, because if you look at MLS, I think Aaron Stoller really laid it out in this Twitter rant that he had last night or yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
And
I would warn you about filling Aaron Stoller's head with any more confidence than it already has. Go ahead. All right.
Sure.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Here's the question. I mean, you've got owners. You're getting now to the point where you've got owners in Colorado, New England, Chicago, all marquee markets. And these folks aren't necessarily spending funds in relation to the size of their war chests, so to speak.
Sure. But that's their prerogative. We have a Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I hear that. But what I'm saying is, I mean, it's one thing to look at, I guess what I'm getting at, it's one thing to look at the league as a whole.
Okay.
And a whole other thing to really, and I think this is a necessary step in the evolution of, people supporting MLS, how we consider MLS and that sort of thing. People looking at owners more than the league as a whole, or if you want, the investor operators, in terms of how they're handling their franchises.
Okay.
And I think that's what's going to happen. I think, the commissioner's office is going to be looking at these sorts of things, and they're going to be sort of saying, like, look, you have a franchise in Colorado, you have a franchise in Chicago.
Okay.
And
speed it up a little bit, Ralph. Okay. Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at. I think, if Philly is going ahead and spending money on Maurice Edu,
right.
That's a sign of ambition.
Yeah, but you have competing interests. Ralph, the problem is you have competing interests. You have, on one hand, the fans of the Philadelphia Union ecstatic that their team wants to spend any money at all, because if you go down into the union discussion, most of it is our team spends no money. And you have the league trying to look out for the greater interest, and in their mind, the greater interest is depressing salaries so that they can get the most bang for their buck. They can have the best quality league for the lowest possible price. Now, eventually, this is going to crack. Thanks for the call, Raf. I'm going to move on. Eventually, this is going to crack, and I wonder. And I brought up some significant issues that could happen with the Camilo situation, but I wonder if this is really the first time where we should be asking, when does the whole salary structure come crashing down? This is a potential crack that could spread. Now, it might not be today, and it might not be next week, and it might not be next year, but eventually MLS is going to have to deal with the fact that they're not going to be able to control everything forever if they want to be one of the best leagues in the world by 2022, et cetera, et cetera. Vince, what's up?
You know, this is the first time I'm calling this week, so everyone needs to settle their tea kettle.
Okay. Settle your tea kettle. Slow your roll, says Vince. What's up?
Hey, Jason, man. I'm just thinking about this, right? And I understand, Maurice Edu isn't a big name player. I mean, he's a guy who hasn't even seen the bench for Stoke City. But I mean, my whole mind of it is if it's the Philadelphia Union's fault for saying, okay, we'll give you $1.2 million. And I don't like when people say, I'm sorry, Jason, and I disagree with you when you say, oh, but Kyle Beckerman doesn't make that money, or Will Johnson doesn't make that money.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean you disagree with me, Vince? What are you disagreeing with? That Kyle Beckerman
reflects poorly on Beckerman and Will Johnson. I mean, that's not their fault.
That is not the point at all, Vince. The point is that if Maurice Edu is worth $1.2 million in the new MLS, then what is Kyle Beckerman worth? Because he's as good and he's proven it longer in MLS.
No, and he should be making that money, but the fact is he isn't, Jason. Philadelphia is willing to give that to Maurice Edu.
Okay.
It's just a question of whether Real Salt Lake will perhaps give Beckerman a raise or Portland give Will Johnson a raise, which I think should happen. And I think personally that what's going to end up happening with this new CBA is those $1.2 million contracts are going to become a normal thing.
Oof. Well, that's a lot of money to spend, Vince. $70 million TV contract or not, it's a lot of money to spend on one player. I know that this league has been trending towards bigger salaries based on DPs, but we're talking about, a handful of guys. You end up paying your essentially the backbone of your league, like the Will Johnsons, Dax McCarty's, and Kyle Beckerman's $1.2 million, then that everybody's salary comes up naturally. Now, you're going to flush out some of the lower end guys, because if salaries are going up, you're not going to pay a guy who's not worth it, $250,000. But it's going to. All I'm saying is the league's going to change significantly if that's what we're talking about. Thanks for the call, Vince. You got anything else? I got to get moving.
No, man. Just take it easy.
All right. Appreciate it, Vince. Thanks a lot. Vince from Toronto, always calling. But first time this week. Jonathan Tannewald's calling in. What's up, Jonathan?
This is the question that I have. And it's a two-part question. One is, to what degree do MLS teams have the right to make bad decisions in addition to good decisions?
Okay.
Because I'm not convinced at all that Maurice Edu is worth $1.2 million, but if somebody wants to spend it,
right,
that's their prerogative.
Yeah, but we were talking about a laissez-faire attitude in a league that has never had a laissez-faire attitude. I mean, come on.
I know, but it's a trap that they've put themselves into. And the other part of the trap they've put themselves into is when they said last year that designated players are exempt from the allocation process.
Yes.
Now they're saying, oh, no, you're not actually.
Yeah,
that's I've got a problem with.
I raised
because
that,
then they're stepping on their own words.
I raised that issue yesterday, and that seems to be, that is an issue that should not should bother people more. I mean, I think fundamentally salaries are always more important, but when you have the league, and look, they known for making up rules, but generally speaking, there's some logic to the rules that they make up. We may not hear about them for 6 months, but at least there's some logic to it. In this case, it's difficult to find the logic other than Michael Bradley and Clint Dempsey meet some standard that is not written down anywhere. Now, again, that's an MLS thing as well. It's not written down anywhere. But it's so nebulous, and we talked about it. It's so nebulous, the idea that there's a distinct difference between this DP and that DP. What is it? Oh, if you don't have a cap in the last year, then you don't go, then you go through the allocation. I mean, that's not, you can even say that with a straight face.
And it opens up a perception and it might not be a fair perception, and it really might not be a fair perception, that Seattle and Toronto got some kind of preferential treatment.
Right. Well, I mean, but that's
that to me is a problem in a league where everybody's supposed to be equal and competitively balanced and so forth.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I think we're like the history of the league is at a crossroads in terms of there are cross purposes involved. I mean, so many people want to see the league release a little bit more of this money and spend a little bit more and make an effort to take a step forward in quality. But what exactly does that mean, and how exactly do you go about that? And if you don't have the money in the league coffers, if you don't have the money to spread out, here's $10 million for every team, go do what you want with it. If it's a matter of a couple of ownership groups wanting to spend it, and that will help your league, and you let them. But then, when you're talking about, because there's a significant difference between the financial commitment of Toronto FC, just to one of those players, pick one, Bradley or Defoe, and what Philadelphia wants to give to Maurice Edu, and yet Maurice Edu's situation is being treated like the more damaging possibility.
And if, I don't know. If they want to play the market size card, I can play it right back on them because this is a pretty big one.
Yeah.
And they need some help, and there are going to be a lot of empty seats in PPL Park this year if they don't, if the deals that they're trying to do don't get pulled off. And as has been said, I know you were talking about this with me and some other people last night. Garber's going to be here tomorrow, standing in a room full of a couple hundred of the most devoted Union fans there are. That's not going to be very easy for him.
I bring this up only because I was asked, Jonathan, and I don't think it plays any particular role. I think the differences in the resumes of Bradley and Edu are so significant that this is probably a non-issue. But somebody asked me on Twitter, Brian Blickenstaff, we've had him as a guest on the show. He asked me if race has been mentioned in this. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with anything. But, from the perspective of the average fan, I don't know if that's something that they're just going to gloss over.
I think that one's a little far out there for my taste.
All right, fair enough, and I agree with you.
But look, I don't think Maurice Edu is worth $1.2 million.
In MLS, wait, hold on, Jonathan, because this is important. Is he not worth $1.2 million in MLS, or is he not worth $1.2 million anywhere in the world market?
If somebody wants to, but this is my point. If somebody wants to pay him that money,
you're only worth what somebody will pay.
Yes.
So he is worth, according to if the union are willing to pay it, then he is worth it because at least one person and one team is willing to sign off on that salary. Now, again, we're talking about, for the greater good and whatever MLS HQ decides that is, and his potential impact. Again, I think that when Rick McGovern called and said that he thought that Bradley wrecked the scale more than Edu did, or the cow was already out of the barn, horse already out of the barn.
Dempsey wrecked the scale.
Well, okay, yes, you could argue that, but again, I'm not even sure I can put it into words, but there's an exceptionalism here to those two players, and it has everything to do with their place in the national team, heading to the World Cup in a couple of months. That makes it where I don't really view them as part of the rest of the salary structure. I mean, I'm sure that's wrong, and no agent is going to pass up the opportunity to point to their salaries when they go into a negotiating room. But it still feels to me like Bradley and Dempsey are beyond, and especially because they're coming back when they didn't have to. Let's say it that way.
That's fine, but then I go back to the designated player precedent set last summer, and if you're going to say publicly, as they did when Dempsey signed, quote, and this is straight out of the statement that they put out last summer. I went and looked up last night. Quote, 4 new players signed by an MLS club as a designated player, the allocation process does not apply.
Yes. They put that in simple language, and now they're backing away from it. And if I were the union, obviously upset if the league won't let me pay a player I want to pay to come in and help me out. Also upset that I was forced to trade away a veteran central defender in order to move up in the allocation order for a guy who should be exempt from the allocation order, except for he's not. For why? What's happening? Difficult.
That's why I'm in the lobby of the hotel where they're all staying.
All right, we'll go ask some questions. Thanks for your time, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, bye.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Jonathan Tannenwald from Philly.com. And look, Aaron Stoller's calling in. I mentioned his name on the show. I probably shouldn't have done that. Aaron, what's up?
Well, the bat signal went off. I suddenly get people flagging me on Twitter that
wait.
I've come up, but have no idea in what context.
Wait, so you're going to call a live radio show and say, why did you talk or what did you say about me? That's what you're going to do?
I've been told I need to defend my honor.
No, not somebody said that they enjoyed your Twitter rant about Edu last night. And I made a comment that was akin to saying, don't pump his head up anymore.
Oh, I can live with that. My head's massive. I can hardly fit normal hat size.
So there you go. I knew you'd have no problem with it. I wasn't picking a fight. It was perfectly.
You're not picking a fight. I didn't think you were. I do want to disagree. I was listening the last couple minutes. I think there is a racial component, and here what it is, and not to the decision, but there's an implication. So what does it say to young African American kids who maybe play soccer and play something else?
Yeah.
And who are really accomplished athletes at that age.
Okay.
That MLS gives the money to the white guy, gives the money to the foreign guy, and Maurice Edu can't get it or isn't going to be able to get it.
Wait. Hold on.
We want these kind of guys. We want these kind of athletes. We don't want to send that message.
Okay, Aaron, I am all for setting those important examples, and they have to come in the natural flow of the process. I don't think that should dictate whether or not you give Maurice Edu $1.2 million.
What dictates whether he should get it is whether Philadelphia wants to give it to him.
Okay, well,
the other stuff. Now that you've opened this Pandora's box with Seattle and Toronto, that's it.
Okay, all right. I get, you're pulling in an issue that I don't know is that important, but there is an argument to be made that there's some ramifications to saying no to this deal.
And none of it's intentional. They're not doing it because he's black. I'm not saying that for 1 second. I'm just saying the optics are bad.
Sure. I don't think they're as bad as you're making them out. I'm not sure everybody's going to connect those dots, but it's possible. And I question why Jermaine Defoe's foreignness is more important than his blackness.
Well, I'm trying to make a point.
Oh, I see that, but you've sort of slalomed around a couple of things. I mean,
because it's about attracting African American players, and it's about attracting African American kids to the sport.
The goal should be about attracting all kinds of players. I understand your point.
But when you see white guys get contracts,
I get it.
You see Omar and Latino and guys getting contracts.
I get it.
Why is it you're not getting it?
So when Josie Altidore comes back to MLS in either 1, 2, or 5 years, depending on how bad you think he is, and gets a contract for multiple millions of dollars, then we can put this issue to bed, right?
Fair enough, but he's not the player trying to come back right now.
No, he's not. There's one player coming back. He happens to be black. He happens to be an African American, and he happens to be a guy who's been riding the bench for a year and a half. That's part of the issue.
None of that really matters in comparison to the fact that Philadelphia has deemed him worth of that money.
All right.
God forbid a team in the middle class of MLS attempt to get itself better.
Okay.
This is what I was saying last night. MLS knows what to do with its elite teams and is more than happy to coddle its truly dreadful teams. But the teams in the middle who try and make a step up, they seem unprepared to deal with.
That's a good issue. That's something I can talk about with you. I think bringing up race here is a canard that we don't really need to deal with at the moment. I think
that's fine, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything.
I know you're not. I understand that you're talking about the ramifications and the optics and what it looks like. And is there a 10-year-old kid running around a field somewhere who's going to quit soccer because he doesn't see opportunity? I get it, but let's move on. Thanks for the call, Aaron. I appreciate it, man. I'll see you tomorrow. I just hung up on Aaron. Maybe he deserved that. All right. Honestly, I'm glad that you guys called in and we had this discussion. It wasn't supposed to be just about Maurice Edu in the situation today, but clearly this is fundamental to what's happening in MLS and sort of the new era of MLS. I don't know what version we're on now. Are we on 2.1? Are we on 3.0? Where are we? I have no idea. But there were a couple of other stories I wanted to mention while I have a couple of minutes here. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm definitely tracking this story with Assem Alam, the owner of Hull City, who is attempting to make that change to Hull Tigers and is getting a lot of pushback from the fans. He has made some pretty interesting statements that he intends to walk away from the club if his request to have the name changed is not granted. Now, that is within his rights. It seems like extortion. Look, if you're a fan of Hull City and you don't want the name to change from Hull City AFC, and you buy into the history, and I understand why you do, then Assem Alam should not be your concern. If he wants to walk away, let him walk away. Now, if you want your team to take a step up in the world, in the Premier League, and Alam is the way to get there, you may have to make a deal with the devil on that front. It's interesting, the discussion of history, how important it is, whether or not they change from Hull City AFC to Hull Tigers is fundamentally making a mockery of all of that history. Michael Parkhurst is with the Columbus Crew. I meant to mention that last week, or a couple days ago. Maybe it was last week. And I guess I failed. People are calling me out on it. And I mentioned him today. What is Michael Parkhurst making? I'd be curious to know. Juan Agudelo headed out on loan. He is a Stoke City player. His pre-contract was not voided by his denial of a work permit in England. He will go on loan, more than likely to a Dutch or Belgian club. Check out Greg Seltzer at noshortcorners.com for your rumors on Juan Agudelo. Bofo Batista signs with Chivas USA. Hooray! Is this 2008? No, it's not. It's 2014. It's a little underwhelming that Bofo is finally in MLS. Maybe that jazzes the Chivas USA fan base. Maybe not. I don't know why it would. He's on the downside of his career. Clearly, he can make them a little bit better. He can score some goals, but it's not going to be a fundamental change there. Louisville getting out there, making some noise in the world of professional soccer. I may have mentioned this last week. I think we took a phone call last couple days from somebody in Louisville pushing that. The Orlando City Soccer Club brass, including Phil Rollins, went up to Louisville to meet with some people and meet some supporters as they push to get the franchise rights from Orlando when Orlando goes into MLS in 2015. Louisville sounds, I've never been there. Seems like a very cool town. They obviously like their college soccer. If Papa John's is going to build you a stadium or whatever, I hope they play there. I saw something. What's Louisville Slugger Park? Is that a baseball stadium? Can we avoid the baseball stadium thing? I know it's minor league soccer. Beggars can't be choosers, but can we just not do the minor league baseball stadium thing? It's already happening in my area up in Northern Virginia with the Virginia Cavalry, who, by the way, are they on hold? I'm not keeping track of my franchise news. The World Cup referee list, I wanted to go down that, make a couple jokes and point out that these are the people everybody's going to hate in a couple of months. But just from a name perspective, Mark Geiger from MLS is on this list. He'll be refereeing in a World Cup. And Howard Webb from England. Everybody knows Howard. Everybody loves that guy. Mark Geiger, and this is the CONCACAF list. Chicas Aguilar from El Salvador. Mark Geiger from USA, and Moreno Rodriguez. Marco Antonio Rodriguez Moreno from Mexico. So there you go. There's your World Cup referees from CONCACAF. All right, that's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. Tomorrow, I'm in Philadelphia. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do. There's not going to be a 10 o'clock show. I'm sorry for that. Pay attention to my Twitter feed, Soccer Morning, NASN TV. Be on the lookout. We will be doing something, I promise. And we'll talk to you then. Bye.
Back in the days on the boulevard, I landed. We used to kick routines and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract. And me, the 5 foot.